let's explore child's pose in a little bit more detail. Child's pose, also known as balasana, is a really soothing, comforting pose. It's a pose that can really help us to calm down after a long day. It's a lovely stretch for the spine, and it's one of those poses that you can always use while you're in the flow of the practice to take a little break if you're feeling tired or like you need to catch your breath. So child's pose generally looks like this. We start with the knees together and then sit the buttocks down onto the heels. From here, the hands walk forward, the belly comes to lie over the thighs, and the arms reach to the front and the head reaches down towards the mat. So that is one version of child. We can also take what is known as a wide-legged child, whereby we open the knees slightly away from each other. And for some people, this is the more comfortable version because there's a bit more space in the hips and there's a bit more space for the belly to come down in between. So as you walk the hands forward, you'll see that I can drop a little deeper. It's easier to get to the ground with the knees open wide. And then once you're here, you would perhaps walk the hands further forward. You can see there's a tiny little gap between my hips and my heels. Not a problem whatsoever. And then this is essentially your child's pose. Now, let's see how can we adjust this pose if neither of those two versions feel good for you. So there are several things in child's pose that can be a little bit restrictive or limiting based on what your body has been used to all your life. First thing that we see is often that people find flattening the front of the ankles down and putting weight in there doesn't always feel so good. So one thing you can do, if the front of the ankles are bothering you, is take your blanket. You can see it's folded, a little bit padded, and then you can place that so that it catches you on the front of the shin, top of the foot, and that makes it a little bit more comfortable. You might also need to wiggle around. Maybe it feels better to have just the front of the ankles there. These things can be very subjective, but this is one way that we can support the ankles a little bit, especially if they're tight. Now, the second area where we often see challenge is that putting weight onto the knees like this is also not very comfortable. So then you can open your blanket a little bit wider and then place the knees onto the blanket so they have a little bit of padding and support. Now, number 3, what we often also see when people come to yoga and they're kind of new to the practice and still feeling a bit stiff in the body is that the hips don't go down towards the heels. And this is not a problem at all. The thing that I would recommend you do is, as best you can, you just reach your hips back, even if there's a little bit of a gap, and perhaps place your pillow in between your buttocks and your heels so that you can feel like you are sitting down without having to touch the heels themselves. So you'll see this makes it very easy to get my head down and kind of stretch out. There's a lovely stretch of my spine still. So this is another way you can approach child's pose, is by putting your pillow there. This is coincidentally also what we recommend if you're feeling a lot of tightness in the knees doing this pose. So you'll see without the pillow, sitting down, I have to bend a lot deeper in the knees, which means we often feel quite a strong pull here and even into the knee. But by lifting our bums higher, creating that space and that padding with the pillow, we don't go bend so deep into the knee, which means the knees feel a little bit more comfortable. Now, the next thing we often see in child's pose is that when we reach the arms forward, people really struggle with discomfort in the shoulders. So if you look at this, not necessarily on the ground, doing this with your arm, if that is already not so comfortable and you feel a bit of a pinch, the best thing to do is essentially, instead of straightening the arms forward, you bend the elbows out. That gives a lot more space to the shoulder joint, and especially when we're kind of reaching forward and we've got the weight of the upper body resting into the elbows, swinging them out wider means that your shoulders are going to feel much more at ease. Another challenge I often have noticed with child's pose is that people struggle to put their forehead down to the mat. And if that is the case, you can use a second pillow to rest your head. You can use your hands, stacking them on top of each other like a pillow, and then resting your forehead onto the hands. So here you can see a lovely supported child's pose with padding under the head, padding between the buttocks and the heels. Another way that you can approach this is to actually just place the pillow in front of you. So with the knees a little wider, the pillow in between the knees, and most of the pillow supporting your chest. You can take child's pose like this. And this is a really nice alternative if your spine feels very stiff, or if you just want to be able to stay in the pose for a long time to relax. Now, if none of those options work for you, it doesn't mean that you can't practice child's pose. It might just mean that you need a little bit more time for your body to get ready for the shape. And while that happens, there is an alternative that you can practice on your back, especially if you've had injuries on your knees, which means that they just don't like being bent and having weight or pressure in them. So in that case, we simply do child's pose on our backs. So you're welcome to keep a blanket under your lower back for a little bit of lift. You can even place a pillow there. And then we simply grab the knees in towards the chest. So you'll see I still have a little bit of a stretch on my lower back, same as child's pose. My spine is softer though, and there's no weight on the knees. You can grab the fronts of the shins. For some people, it's more comfortable to grab the back of the thighs. And the most important thing is that you feel that lovely stretch over your tailbone. So this is a nice alternative for knee injuries. I hope that you have been able to find the child pose that works for your body. Please do let us know if you need any more help, or simply share which version you prefer.